Hello, I'm Tara Powers, CEO of Powers Resource Center. And this month's Tara's Tips is focused on how to recover after a toxic leader has left the workplace. And I think this is a very appropriate topic to discuss, given our current situation in the world and in our country. And I think it's really important to recognize the impacts that a toxic leader can have on an organization and to have on a team. And so as you're watching this, I want you to think about a toxic leader you may have experienced in your life. I certainly have, and I'm sure all of us have an example of a toxic leader and how you might describe their toxic behavior. Maybe they were a bully. Maybe they harassed you. Perhaps they were disrespectful. They put you down. They made fun of your ideas or kind of threw you under the bus in front of the rest of the team. They led by fear and intimidation. They had a bias towards certain people on the team, or they had their favorites. All of those types of toxic behaviors certainly are not easily forgotten once that toxic leader leaves the workplace or leaves the team. And unfortunately, the true cost of their impact on a team can last for a really long time. So it has long-term impacts. And so today I want to talk about what if you find yourself in a position where you are a new leader of a team. You've been hired or promoted to a team that has experienced a lot of toxicity in the past. How do you actually turn that around? And so I've put together for you an infographic on this topic. That is called 6 Strategies to Recover After a Toxic Leader. And we're going to talk about each of these today. So the first one that I want to mention, which is really important and certainly probably one of the most important things you can do, is to acknowledge the toxic environment that people have been operating in. And for some people, it's been years, right? Even if it's months, it still creates a feeling of fear and intimidation and unworthiness, right? And that I don't have value, that I'm not supposed to contribute, or my contributions don't matter. So we have to acknowledge as a new leader what the environment was like for people and how they currently feel. How do they feel about their role on the team? Why do they think their role matters? Do they think it matters? They may not. That's where you may need to really understand, where do I need to spend some time repairing the damage that was caused. And the other thing that you want to acknowledge right away is a story that creates a vision of what's possible. What's possible for this team? What is possible when a healthy team culture exists? What does that look like between a leader and their team? What does that look like between team members? What does it feel like? And create a compelling enough story and a compelling enough vision that you ignite a little bit of hope, right? Because that's all they need. They just need that hope to take that first step and start exploring some different ways of being as a team. But if they don't feel there's hope, nothing's going to happen. They're going to stay probably stuck for longer than you would like. All right, strategy number 2 to recover after a toxic leader has left the organization is to implement a listening strategy. You want to go on a listening tour, maybe is the great way to think of it, right? You want to engage in listening with every single member of your team. You might want to engage in listening with peers of that leader who also were impacted by their behavior, other teams who were impacted by their behavior, but just getting a sense of what was the culture like and what's that gap? Like, I got to establish some kind of gap here so I understand how much work is going to be required, how much trust I need to build. If I'm at 0 and I want to get to 100, I got a ways to go, right? And I got to take baby steps to get there. So engaging in a listening strategy not only helps you understand the gap that you're dealing with, but also it starts to put little coins of trust in that trust bank with each of your team members and with other people in the organization. Strategy number 3 is being a role model. You have to be the shining example of behaviors that lead to open communication, trust, and respect. And this has to be consistent. If you tend to get flustered or frustrated and maybe take that out on others when something goes wrong, you got to really reel that in and figure out different strategies for how you're going to manage that effectively. Because if you are taking over a team that had a toxic leader, the second they sense any of that toxic behavior, they're immediately going to go back to where they were. So your consistency in terms of how you deliver difficult messaging, how you give difficult feedback, the way that you engage them in problem solving, even if it's tough, is going to make a huge difference. You have to be the change that you want to see. Strategy number 4 is celebrating and recognizing when you notice healthy team behavior occurring. So when you see that team member who was maybe very quiet for several weeks or months finally raise their hand and say, I don't actually think I agree with that, and here's why, point that out. Thank them for taking that risk. Thank them for their contribution. Allow them to fully express their idea, right? And allow that safe space for those kinds of conversations and disagreements to occur. So we want to recognize healthy behavior the moment we see it, and we want to do that consistently. Strategy number 5 is, as a new leader on a team that had a toxic environment previously, recognize that for at least that first year, you're going to need to invest and engage in consistent team building activities. And that is not happening just for 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting, right? We're talking about team building events where you're doing something fun, you're collaborating on something together. Maybe you bring in an outside facilitator to help engage in a style assessment. I use the DISC style assessment with a team and help them understand their different approaches to teamwork. Perhaps you take everyone off site if you can to do a strategy session, bring in some food if you can do that. I know in COVID, we might not have the chance to do that, but engaging in team building, whether it's virtual or in person for that first year and doing it frequently, is one of the fastest paths to creating new relationships between each other. And it can't just be that 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of your goal setting meeting or your task meeting or your progress updates. This has to be specifically time set aside to rebuild relationships. The other key thing that needs to happen in that team building is that you're co-creating what that healthy new team culture looks like. Maybe you do activities together around, what does trust look like on a team? What are the behaviors that support building trust on a team? And what are the top 5 behaviors that we want to focus on to rebuild trust on this team? And we agree on that and vote on that together. And another idea is operationalizing your values. This is really important, right? If your values are just words on a piece of paper hanging on the wall, how do we actually make those real? How do we make that part of our day-to-day interactions? How do we make sure we're living those values out loud? That is a conversation that you do collaboratively, and you co-create and agree on what are the behaviors that demonstrate these values in action. So day to day, as we're operating with each other, what are the behaviors we want to see and observe, and we make sure we recognize them when they're happening, right? We're bringing those value discussions into any hiring conversations. We're bringing that value discussion into any performance conversations. It becomes just part of the way we do business. And then our 6th and final strategy is really around creating a feedback culture. One of the things you have to focus on as a new leader are all the moments and methods where you're inviting feedback into the conversation, where you're making it safe for your team to say, here's what you did that really helped support me on this project. Here's what I could have used more of. This is what I need right now to move up in my career. This is where I'm struggling and I could use some coaching. You want to create that safe space in one-on-one meetings, maybe even an anonymous opportunity to complete a survey, to do pulse surveys, especially that first year, but you're collecting feedback as often as possible. And let me just make sure that you're clear. You're doing something that most likely your predecessor did not. They did not ask for feedback. They did not ask, how am I doing? What can I do to help you? What can I do to support you? Did that work for you the way I gave you feedback after that meeting? Most likely, they've never had that question asked, at least for a long time. And at first, you might get the deer in the headlights look, but be consistent. Show them that this matters, that they matter, that their voice matters. That is one of the most important things you can focus on, is creating that feedback culture. So those are the 6 strategies that I encourage you to think about in terms of recovery. How do you recover after you've had a toxic leader? Acknowledge, listen, role model, recognize, build team building, and feedback focus. Of course, if you're an organization where one of your teams is experiencing this exact situation and they have had a toxic leader in the past and now are trying to recover and you need a little help, reach out to us. We have a lot of great programs that we're excited to support you with. Stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time, take care.